Pleasure to have you here, man. It's been looking forward to having you on the show for a couple weeks now, man. So it's good. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, it's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it must be a little different being on this side of the camera. And I guess we should probably tell the audience. Chase is my production guy. He is the guy that does all my work in the back end. So if you found this podcast by looking on the reels on Instagram or TikTok or anywhere else, and that drove you to the podcast, that's his job. His job is to get you from there, to get you to the podcast, and just to make what stupid things I say coherent and sound cool. So
it's great to finally be here. As he was saying, like, this is our first time really getting together. We got connected remotely, and so we have been working together. I've been on the production side of things, and so being able to, one, finally get together and connect, and also two, having been a person who's been behind the scenes in the marketing and content marketing space, I've learned so much about like little things about real estate after knowing practically zilch.
Right.
And so we thought it'd be a perfect idea to bring me, someone who is definitely going to be getting into real estate, because I've learned just through exposure of information how valuable of a tool set it is to build wealth.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And abundance, for that matter. I want to learn more. So it's a perfect chance for me to kind of be the persona of new beginner in real estate and ask all the questions, start from a very broad funnel and get very nitty gritty.
And that's kind of our goal. We were just talking before we started rolling, like our intent is to not have anything overly planned out. We just want to have an organic conversation coming from somebody who hasn't done much or anything really in real estate, and who has watched it from the other side of the camera. And so this is unique in that Chase isn't a blue collar guy, right? Chase works on computers and he does video editing and social media marketing and all kinds of things. Is that a fair way to describe what you do?
And just also like building and scaling business more so too. Like I think that just like a little bit of context around like my background, like I would consider myself more like social media, content marketing, growth marketing is a skill set. But then it's also the entrepreneurship component behind like scaling the business, like building out SOPs, training, your team employees, building a regimented quality system for editing deliverables, et cetera, et cetera. So like I would say that I'm, as much of a marketer as well as I am an entrepreneur. I'm also a guy in sales,
absolutely.
And I'm also an operations builder and I'm a manager,
Yeah, all of the above.
So,
and just like all of us in business, it's like you have to have all of these pieces put together and you got to get a great team. So this will be interesting because, you don't conform to the blue collar component of this space. You do conform to, you're an entrepreneur, you're a young guy, you're motivated, you're hungry, you want to build something meaningful with your life. And not just a big fat bank account, although I'm sure you want one of those too. And are driving towards that as we speak, but you're a curious guy and you are so good at answering great questions. And that's how this interview really came to the fore, because he and I talk a lot about like how to drive producing value. Like the thing that we talk about all the time when we're talking about podcasts and like what kind of things should I be talking about is just pack as much value into that podcast and into every video as humanly possible. That makes your job easier to package it up and make it look cool on Instagram and on the shorts that you guys do such a great job with, you and your team. But what happened was we were talking about how can we, what direction should we be going? What are some of the topics we should be talking about? How can we serve the people who are going to be consuming this content? And you started rattling off like 38 questions. And I was like, at first I was like, holy crap, this is great. Like, I'm not even, because I'm further down the road, you know what I mean? Like it's so easy to lose perspective of what to me seems like common knowledge or things that I don't even take consideration to think about anymore. Now it's just a natural part. I look at a house and I think, oh, I got to do this, or this is how I'm going to approach this, or this is how I'm going to finance this, or whatever. And so the questions you were asking me were questions that I had to address 10 years ago before I got started.
So we thought that this would be a perfect opportunity because not only can I be inquisitive, but more importantly, I don't have the same lens that Jonah has. I have not been in the trenches for 10 years. And so there's so many things. And also I just, from being involved in the space, have kind of begun to build a lens to see what are the important things that an audience wants to know. And this specific episode is going to be geared around you're a beginner in real estate, you have the work ethic, you're down to grind, you just got to know the information. And so what are the questions that are going to come to you? We're going to dissect all that. We're basically going to create an informational journey, if you will, that takes you from the beginning step all the way to some steps that are going to be going, down in the future. Is the goal and direction of what this conversation is going to be. We're not really sure what that's going to be, but that's the intention.
We'll find out. Yeah.
And so
I think it can be super valuable, man. It's like, so a lot of podcasts, particularly ones in real estate or investing spaces, are talking to people who have already made it. You know what I mean? Like there are people who have already accomplished all these many, many things. I've done a lot in real estate, but I've got a long way to go. I always feel like such a little fish when I'm listening to some of these other things, but I do have an expansive amount of knowledge, and I'm, well down my road, and I'm continuing down there. And I think this is going to be really fun to kind of have the opportunity to look at it starting from scratch,
And one last point, just to reinforce what you were saying too, is that you just said how you watch other guys that are so super successful, and oftentimes people get exposed to those guys because their content is so built out that they're the ones reaching the little fish, that it can almost feel super daunting and feel like, these guys have been doing it. They've been in the space for years, right? But it doesn't have to be that. And the goal of the Blue Collar Blueprint is to be able to create that information at the same playing field, right? Correct. It's not coming from even in a doctor-patient setting. You can only heal the patient if you're at their same level and you're meeting them together, and you're not like the doctor talking down.
Correct.
Because all of a sudden, they feel inferior, and creating an environment or an instance of inferiority can oftentimes lead to inaction or paralysis.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I have this experience, right? Like
totally,
I'll be watching, some of these like huge products, and people will be like, oh yeah, well I bought 300 units, and I'll be like, 300 units? Like, I know a lot about real estate, and I've been in this space, and I know a lot of people, but I don't have 300 units, I want to, but I don't, even from where I'm starting, I have something to leverage, and it's still like, oh my God, how do you do that?
So big picture, FYI, we just got together. He was telling me that he literally owns a property right behind in the backyard, and he told me that he dropped a deal that was worth more than $250,000, and he paid for it in cash, cold hard cash, or it was for this property. And so that, in that moment, gave me a quick inferiority complex. And so for him to be saying that he has this inferiority complex for other things shows you that that's natural.
Right.
That's part of the process. And the only way to to build to make your inferiority complex higher is one, action, and two, the right information. That's what we're trying to do.
And our goal is to grow from wherever we're at, right? I mean, it's like nobody comes out of the damn womb as a full-blown oak tree, you know what I mean? Everybody 100%. Starts as the acorn. You got to work 100%. It out from there. So that's our intent, and that's hopefully we'll be able to provide some guidance.
Let's do it.
Let's get on to it, man. So again, just to reiterate, unlike our typical interviews where I'm sort of the interviewer and you're the interviewee, it might be a little bit more like Definitely. You're interviewing more me in this situation. So we'll just kind of see where the conversation goes. So hit me with it, man. What do you got?
So I think that in this last episode, if you haven't seen that podcast, for sure check it out. I think it was one of the most value-packed episodes yet. He was talking about how there's a specific VA loan that the guys that are veterans can apply for. Then they basically are eligible for a 0% down on their loan, and they can get a finance up to a certain amount to basically loan out or finance a home. So they only have to put any money down, and then they can just, as long as either A, it's already fixed up, it doesn't need a lot of work, they can just go ahead and turn it around and rent it out and create a cash flow from that. That was when I realized, oh my God, there's so much information that I don't know yet, that as long as you know it, you can just do it really quickly and apply it.
Yep.
I see real estate now as valuable. I've seen a lot of important information that makes me think, okay, like this can be a powerful tool to build wealth over the next 2 to 5 years. There's 2 questions that come to me right away. The first is, how should I start looking at deals? Is it significant to start locally, or at least within an hour-long radius, so that I can actually look and inspect the property? Is that valuable to be in person? And then secondly, we can dive into capital requirements, such as, are there other pieces of information about general loans or financing options that are available to first-time home buyers? Yeah. I know that there is, that I can leverage as a first-time home buyer buying my first primary residence, that will help me get started on this path in the right foot.
Yeah, so those are great questions. So let me answer the location component of it first.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm a huge proponent of investing where you live, right? Particularly if you're just getting started. Generally speaking, the best first property that anybody should be buying is for themselves to live in. So yeah, you want to live somewhere where your job is or where your roots are, right? So if you got family and you know that you like a particular area, stay in that area, right? You also know already a lot of things about where you already live. You know what are the good neighborhoods, what are the bad neighborhoods. You know, you may know all kinds of different things like, oh, during, you know, down here in Florida, during snowbird season, you can't get anywhere because the roads become a parking lot, for instance. If you're in this section of town, what if I go over here, right? So you know sort of like the inside baseball, and that's something that you want to be taking into effect.
Definitely.
You know, as I'm a real estate agent in addition to all the other things that I do, contractor and builder and drywaller and all this investor, all that crap. But one of the things that I see is I find a lot of people who want to move to the Sarasota area from up north. And they don't know the area very well, and they'll see a listing on Zillow or something, and they'll call me as a real estate agent. Hey, I'm interested in this property, and I'm going, well, that house looks really nice in the pictures, but you don't see the neighborhood. I don't think this is the kind of place that you're thinking, or they're thinking like, oh, well, maybe I could buy this house and use it as an Airbnb, and you're thinking, yeah, maybe that's not the right neighborhood. So that's a long way of saying, I think it's important to buy, when you're getting started anyway, to try to find property in an area that you're familiar with, because you know sort of the criteria of what it is that you're looking at.
So if you had to give 3 important general factors that are decision-making criteria for choosing a property, one is location.
Yeah.
What would you say are the top 3?
Well, before I can answer that question, it may be a different 3 depending on what I'm trying to do with that piece of property, right? So if I'm trying to flip a piece of property, I can buy any house in any neighborhood. It doesn't really matter, as long as I'm buying that house with enough space in order to improve it, right? To manually add value to that property, to increase its worth, and for me to make money on top of it. So flipping is easier in that respect because you can do it anywhere. If you get a good deal, it's a good deal. If you're looking for a rental, are you doing an annual rental, or are you doing a vacation rental? Are you doing a seasonal rental? Is this going to be geared towards old people and snowbirds, or are you looking for families? Are you know, there's a lot of different questions that are involved with that.
So which rental do you recommend, and why? And then what is the criteria available for that? Sure.
So my recommendation is do ones that make money, right? So I own all kinds of different rentals, right? I own annual rentals, I own vacation rentals. We're in the process of doing some development in another state, which is the first time that I'm doing that, doing something outside of my sort of neck of the woods. But my bottom line is I just want to buy things that make money. That's my intent. That's the only reason I want to be involved in real estate. Because it's a lot of work, it costs a lot of money, it is there's a certain degree of risk that's attached to it and all of these things. So my suggestion is get into a piece of property and investment that's going to cash flow and make you money in the long run. But ultimately, right now, my mindset is more so on the short-term space. Interested in short-term space because of a couple of things. Number one is location. Where we're located right now, we were talking about this before we got rolling, is just a 2-minute drive away from Siesta Key, which is often rated as one of the nicest beaches in the country, So we live in this little tourist town. So we have people coming here all the time. We're also the second fastest growing city in the entire country right now, which means
Sarasota
is
the second fastest growing city
according to the article I read this morning. So
according to an article,
an article that I read. But the bottom line is we do have a huge influx of people coming into this area, and people like to vacation here. It's a great place to come. It's like it's just a sweet little spot. And so for those reasons, I like the idea of finding property that I believe, because we're in a growth market, is going to continue to appreciate in value. It's become more valuable just by existing. I like finding property that is going to be appealing to people who are coming from out of town because they want to come to a really nice place that's really well cared for, and that's the only kind of place that I like to buy. And so for all of those reasons, I like short-term rentals. Now the benefit of short-term rentals too is that the potential to earn money, cash flowing money, like to bring in a lot of extra dollars, is significant with short-term rentals as opposed to doing an annual rental. And the reason for that is because first off, the house is always immaculate, right? You have to have it look exactly the way it looks on your Airbnb listing or your VRBO listing. And so the lawn is always manicured, and all of the, if there are problems, they get nipped in the bud right away. And so that maintains the value of the overall house. But because we're doing it on a short term, somebody might be willing to spend, say, $400 a night for a room, and they may come and stay for a weekend. Even if they're there for 3 nights, it's $1,200. Maybe you got fees and some other things like that, but a house, the one that you were mentioning earlier, that's right around the corner from here, that house might rent for $3,500 if I did an annual rental. Well, when we're in season, meaning that's when most people are coming down here during the winter time, snowbirds, I can get like $8,000 a month.
From short-term rentals. Because you have a weekend, so it's in season. So those weekends, even if you're not fully booked up during the weekdays or the earlier parts of the weekdays, the weekends you can create such a good cushion.
Exactly right. So we can just generate more people rolling through, and this is a benefit to us. And so for those reasons, we like that's kind of where I'm at. But
so just to like keep numbers in there, so that rental, you said it's approximately like it's a $400K home, something like that. Like the mortgage is anywhere from what, $1,200 to $2,200.
Yeah, well, that we used to be when they didn't have interest rates. So now, so to keep the numbers accurate, so I bought the house when it was a giant pile of crap for $400,000.
Got it.
And then I put $150,000 into it.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the mortgage that we have is somewhere in that $400,000 range. And by the time you pay what's called PITI, it's principal and interest, which is what you pay to the bank, plus taxes and insurance, which is what you pay to the state, for your property taxes and for the insurance costs. Yeah. That payment's about $3,500 a month.
Got it.
For $400,000.
Okay. So like, that payment is how much you said?
$3,500
total.
Correct.
Got it. So if you're doing annual, you're saying, and it was approximately $3,500, you're basically breaking even. But if you're doing short-term rental and you're playing the seasons right and you're marketing it well on Airbnb,
correct,
you can be cash flowing like $4,000 or
$4,500
a month, and like that's a salary.
That's pretty darn good. Yeah, there was a time not a long time ago when that's what I used to make in a month working full time.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And this thing runs itself. My manager takes care of everything. All I do is drive by it every now and again, make sure everything's doing what it's supposed to be, and then collect a check, and that's cash flow. That's what we're ultimately driving forward.
So we're gonna get into like building your team and like your manager, but just to finish off this point, so you would say that for short-term rentals as a great way of making more money. And I also want to get more into the system of, you mentioned like keeping it polished. You're going to have a team in place, systems that maintain that aesthetic all the time. It's convenient for you right now because you're close by, so you can always do a quick little, you can always clean up after something and save. I
can literally do drive-bys and make sure that people aren't having parties
good,
or there's
and you probably have your checklist and your standardization of check all these things, make sure all of it's good so that you just don't make any errors. And
to be honest with you, I don't do that. My property manager does that. That's what I hired them to do, right? So
beautiful.
Their job is to make sure that all of this stuff is in place because I want it to be passive income. Right. Passive means that it's money that I earn without me having to do a whole lot of stuff for it anymore, right? So you build a machine and then that machine prints you money. That's the goal. And so so I don't handle that stuff. I just drive by because I live around the corner. And so I like to drive by, okay, the house still looks good. And I'm making sure that my machine, my team are doing what they're supposed to do. But ultimately, they're really the boots on the ground who are handling those things and letting the deal do itself. And just to also clarify, I don't want to give anybody any kind of false understanding. That $7,000 per month or $8,000 that we may be earning really only happens in season, which is about a 6-month period of time. The other 6 months, we're not going to be earning that $7,000 or $8,000. It rotates through. So we may be in a situation where 1 month I only get $3,000. So I may have a month in August
cash flow,
where I have a negative cash flow, But the idea is that over the course of the year, I'm going to net, meaning I'm going to actually have more dollars in my hand than it costs me to run this business.
And then not to mention, at any given point, you have an asset that appreciates that you can sell and turn around if you need to.
That's exactly right.
Especially, so even if you're only cash flowing like 30, 40, 50 grand a year in the beginning, and it could be more.
Well, realistically, it's going to be significantly less than that.
Okay.
So your goal, my goal anyway, is to try to cash flow $1,000 per month on average per property, right? So
great.
Some months I may get 4, and then other months I may have negative 500. But over the course of that year, my goal is to cash flow $1,000 for this investment. In this particular case, I've got we bought it for $400. I put $150 into it, so I have $550,000 into this property. But the value of that thing is roughly $700,000, right? Beautiful. So I've got $150,000 in equity. Yeah. So if it comes to a situation where we decide I need that 150 because I'm going to buy another opportunity or because of whatever else, I can sell it and I should be able to get that 150 to take to do something else with. Right. Or it can just continue to pile up and in maybe 10 years it may be worth $900,000 and now you've got 350, right?
All while it was cash flowing for you throughout the time.
Correct.
Creating you more money.
Exactly.
Because the original 150K that you sunk into it, you didn't sink into it, you added into it. Correct. Because you get to pull that out. Because that initial cost expenditure ends up being equity that creates value in the home.
That's correct.
So then all you did was you just added however much you cash flowed on an annual basis. Right. You added that to your pocket.
Correct. And if you refinance it correctly, you can get all of that money back, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea. You can buy the property, you fix it up, and then when you refinance it on the back end, you get all of that money back so that you're not just dumping hundreds of thousands of dollars every time you're trying to collect a new investment. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Okay, so the top three decision criteria would be location, like the numbers and like cash flow criteria. Cash flow potential is the biggest one.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean that's really just like
those are the big ones, I mean, it's like so obviously we want to make sure are we conforming to local laws. We have to make sure that we're following all the rules and all of this kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean the big one is, can I make money on it? And honestly, that's the question that's going to drive all the other questions. Can I make money on this opportunity? Well, can you buy it at the right price? Yeah. Can you do the work that's necessary in order to get it to wherever you need to get it to?
So that's where I want to go. So I've identified, I know that the area is growing, and there's a lot of great growing cities around the country, around the United States. Florida, like I'm living in St. Petersburg, Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota, and then I'm also from like the Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton area. Like those are all great. Like we're probably going to be more expensive
right now. Is going crazy.
Yeah, the whole state's going crazy. I've decided that I know the location, I know my criteria, and I'm finding potentially good properties and deals. This show is for blue collar workers that might have more of a skill set to be able to put in some of the work that some of these properties are going to need. It sounds like to me that the more of a skill set you have to be able to build properties, the wider array of deals that you're going to be able to have at your disposal to make valuable for you. Because someone like me, I literally asked him what drywall was when I got here 15 minutes ago. So I would need to either have the resources to learn how to build a home, and I would also need the daily time requirement, anywhere from 2 to 3 to possibly 4 hours late at nights after running my business, to be able to put in the time that it would need to take to be able to get a property into a good place. And so what I want to ask you is, for the audience, we're going to assume that they have at least a basic level of understanding of how to use their hands to build stuff. Sure. If not, they're learning a lot of the ideology and mindset behind what it takes to learn those skill sets in the first place. Right now, if I was to leverage a first-time buyer's loan, and I found a piece of property and it's not a lot of people have 10 grand sitting in their bank account, frankly. They don't. Sure. Right. And it's probably going to you're going to want to have a good cushion, especially if you're buying nicer homes like this that might be more expensive in the first place. Right. Can you finance a lot of the costs that you're going to expect? And then also, is it more important for you to first get your hands on and learning what it's going to take to make a home profitable in the end? Or would you recommend starting to find people to be a part of your team right away, to start focusing on building the system that can expedite that selling process?
Yeah, so
makes sense?
It does make sense. I'll start with this. As somebody who wants to get involved in real estate, my suggestion for the first thing that anybody should do, whether you're blue collar or whether you're not, is sort of irrelevant. First off, don't worry about all of this stuff. You're going to figure it out as you go. That's number one. You don't know things about construction. you do know people who do know things about construction, right?
Correct.
I don't know things about social media. That's why I hired you, right? And I say to you, I don't know how to do this. You take care of this for me. And I trust you to be an expert in that field. So for instance, if you were to buy a house, you hire a guy like me to say, hey, guy who knows things about houses, can you get this, you know, what do I need to be looking for? What do I need to be aware of? And then I can answer those questions for you. And so that's the first thing is don't worry about that. That's not that big a deal. You'll be fine.
Cool.
The second thing is to get started in real estate, you should own your own house first. That's the first thing. You will not lose money on real estate, no matter what, if you don't let it fall apart, right? The only reason the houses ever decrease in value is because they let the houses fall apart. They let the roof leak too long, and then it starts deteriorating the sheetrock, and they've got animals climbing up, you know what I mean? Like all of those sort of things. So don't do that. Maintain your house, and then wait, right? Because everybody who owned a house in 2005, when it was at the top of the market back then, right, and they bought a house, and then in 2008, a few years later, it was at nothing. Well, if they waited until 2015, they made money on their house. Their house was worth more in 2015 than it was in 2005 when they originally bought it, and now it's worth probably 3 times more than that in 2023 than it was back then. And so Warren Buffett said this. Somebody asked him, how much money did you lose during the stock market crash of 2008? He said, none, because I didn't sell any of my shares. You don't lose anything as long as you don't take less than you paid for it, right? So you just wait, and that's the beautiful thing about real estate. It will increase in value no matter what.
So you want to be able to wait out the storm.
Correct.
Right? In general, you want to have a good, cushioned, solid financial foundation.
Yeah. I mean, so
enough.
So you know, my perspective is on this. Like I say, my first suggestion to anybody would be to buy a house that you own that you can live in, because right now you live somewhere and presumably you're paying rent. If you're paying rent, you're just paying the other guy's mortgage. Don't pay the other guy's mortgage, pay your mortgage, you know. You've got to live somewhere anyway, right? So you may as well pay it to yourself as opposed to giving it to somebody else. That's my first thought. It's like, yeah, we all need money. Yeah, bad things can happen. Yeah, economies can change. Yeah, you can lose a job. You still have to live somewhere, you know what I mean? So find somewhere where you can live and then live into it. Now, like we talked about in this episode that you referenced a little while ago, I was answering one of the mailbag questions from a veteran who had a unique opportunity to do some things. And my suggestion to him was to buy a house for himself so he has a place to live for a couple of reasons, and we'll dive into that. That'll answer another one of your questions. But try to find somewhere that can also cash flow while you are living there. So I like to use the example of my brother who did this. He's 10 years younger than me, but he's 18 years old. He goes out and he buys a duplex. He lives in one side, he rents the other side out. His mortgage is paid for by other people. Now he's got a zero risk proposition. He doesn't have to pay any money to live in his house. He doesn't have to pay rent. He doesn't have to pay a mortgage because the people next door are doing it for him.
Crazy.
In his case, he rents out the other bedrooms in his duplex. Now he's making money, right? So he's cash flowing by living in his own house. And that's something that I would suggest that you can do if you can. If you buy a single family place, that's great. Rent out the other bedrooms if that's something that's conducive to you. If you can buy a duplex or a quadplex or whatever you can do that so that you can start generating cash flow from your house, and then you move on to doing whatever other projects you want to do. Now in that case, I was talking to a veteran who had access to a VA loan. Like you mentioned earlier, a VA loan is a unique product that allows people to buy houses with no money down, like a 0% down payment. We have something similar to that in the civilian world for what we call first-time home buyers, and it's known as an FHA loan. And it's basically the same idea. The only difference is instead of having a 0% down payment, it's 3.5%. Which is like not a lot of money, right?
That's not that bad.
It's going to be a few $1,000s. Yes, it's still going to be like, oh my God, how am I going to afford that? But you can come up with 3.5%. It's a heck of a lot better than paying 25% or 30%, which is what you're going to run into as you get further down into the into this world. And so. So 3.5% is a doable number. The criteria on that, just like with the VA loan, is that you have to live in it for at least 1 year in order to buy that piece of property. But you can buy anywhere from a 1 to a 4 family dwelling. I mean, you can buy a single family or a duplex, a triplex, or a quadplex.
So it's probably best and most advantageous to buy a place that has multiple units so that you can rent it out. But that'll make it more expensive.
It will, but those costs are going to be offset by the people who are going to be paying that mortgage on your behalf.
And how easy would you say it is to fill people to join find good tenants and fill them into your place your first time in a decent area that you chose.
Yeah, so, I mean, the fact of the matter is that everybody lives somewhere.
Right.
We've all been in the situation. We've all been renters. We've all know what it's like to want to find a house. So what did you do when you're looking for wherever you live now?
Right.
You go online, you look for an ad, you see it on Facebook, you see it on, apartments.com or wherever, and you say, this looks like a decent place. It's in the area where I want to be, and it's in my price range. You call them, and then you get the place. And that's really all you do on the other side too. You just send it out there and say, hey, I've got this product, and then people will come and take it,
Definitely.
I don't really do any serious advertising with any of my stuff. I just put a sign out in the front yard. And people who live in that community will be driving by and going like, oh, look, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath for whatever, $1,200 a month. Let me call this number and ask the guy a question.
Right, yeah.
It's funny that you bring this up because these are one of the things that people always get super worried about if they're not experienced landlords. And I even talk to people who are experienced landlords and they still get all up in arms about it, about like, how do you find good tenants? Like, you can do background checks and like you can do a certain degree of trying to understand the person that you're hiring, but unless you know them personally, you don't know anything about this person.
Right.
You can tell like their credit score, do they pay their bills? That's an important one if you're somebody collecting rent. But at the end of the day, I'm a believer in just, if you don't have a giant like rap sheet that I'm afraid of for whatever reason, do a basic background check and you have decent credit, then come on in and give it a shot, because I own some very, very nice houses and I own some very not as nice houses, and I've had people destroy my really nice houses, people who make a lot of money and who pay a lot of money in rent, and I've had people who take immaculate care of my very entry level, low income type of family. So the bottom line is that there are great people and scumbags in every walk of life, in every area of town, in every income bracket, and I don't know that you can really know for sure. There are indicators, right? Like I say, I mean, if you have bad credit and you've already proven that you don't pay your bills, then maybe I don't want to take a chance on this. But generally speaking, I just throw a sign out in the front yard and do some entry level, kind of backing up. So if you were to buy yourself a duplex, let's say, and you're trying to fill this place next door, you may have friends who want to live there. You can do it simply that way. You can put an ad out on Facebook, and then you just kind of get a feel. If you like them, sign them up, and if you don't.
And a duplex that's in a decent area is probably going to be competitive and higher price.
Sure.
So you'll need a higher capital investment in the beginning.
But potentially, right? So that's not always the case. It oftentimes it is, and you'll be in competition with people like me who are out there trying to find deals like this, right? And who have who have access to different resources. But there are a lot of properties that all you have to do is go out there and put your nose to the grindstone and find a deal. I mean, that's what we have to do from like professional investor side. We go out there and we just have to find a deal, and it's hard. It's like, oh, this is a pain in the ass, or like everything is expensive, or people want too much money, or there's all kinds of roadblocks. You just have to push those to the side and just keep going until you find the one that you want.
So what was the most important failure or learning lesson that you made in terms of your approach to finding deals? Not about the deals, not about what happened with them, but like what really helped you get so much better at finding deals? And I know that you always talk and harp on you happen to work in homes as being a drywall worker, and so you have a benefit of the word of mouth for people that you meet, and that kind of spreads, and because you've gotten a chance to build rapport, they trust you and they're more willing to sell their home.
Sure.
Something that they have an emotional attachment to, something that they also care about, which is great. He's given that advice, plethora of times on the Blue Collar Blueprint, and he will probably continue to do so. But if that's not the case, if you don't have the opportunity, what's like the second best way of finding deals for someone like myself that's not working in homes?
So there are a million ways to buy houses. I mean, like, you can drive around this entire country and literally see houses for hours and hours and hours and hours. There are a gazillion houses all over the place all the time. Some of them have for sale signs in the front yard and some of them don't. All of them are for sale, right? Potentially, all of them. So the thing is that all you have to do is open your mouth and ask people, are you interested in selling this house? Now, most of the time, like 99% of the time, they're going to be like, no, my house is not for sale. I live here. But I can tell you, if some guy knocked on my door and gave me the right deal, yeah, sure, I'll sell my house. Why not? If it was something that was,
right,
that fit my needs. And there are a lot of people who are in situations just like that, where they'll be willing to sell their house. So in a situation like with what you're in, if you're going out looking for your first deal, is to first off be aware that every house is a potential house that you could buy. Every single one, right? So that's the first thing. It says a lot of people have this sort of like closed off, narrow view.
Mindset, yeah.
They're thinking like, oh man, I can go on Zillow and those houses are the ones that are for sale. It's like, well, no, there's houses that will be coming on sale next week, right? That are empty already and they're in talks with their realtors. What if you can get a hold of that house before it hits the market and before guys like me go out there and see it online and then go in and make cash offers and all these sort of things. So if you can start identifying properties that you find interesting, then you can do that. So what I do, this neighborhood is where I like to invest and it's also where I live, right? So I buy as many houses in this neighborhood as I can. I know it really well. I know what it takes to get these houses up, and there's all these sort of benefits. And so I do what we call farming this neighborhood. I drive around this thing all the time, right? When I'm coming home, I go home 13 different ways. I'm looking to see,
That's what I was going to ask. So it's a manual search process for you.
Yeah, and it's not like I do extra time. It's just like when I'm coming home from the grocery store, I just go this road instead of this road. And, I've never been around this block. Let me take 30 seconds to drive through here. And I'm going, hey, look, that house looks like it's overgrown. I wonder if somebody moved out. Or this house has a for rent sign. For rent signs, to me, are for sale signs, right? 99%, you call them up. Hey, I see your house is for rent. Would you be willing to sell it to me? No, it's for rent. I don't want to do that. Okay, that's fine. But maybe they do want to sell it. Most of the time, if somebody calls me about one of my rentals, is your, can I buy your house? Sure. How much do you want to pay me for it, right? If you pay me the right number, yeah, I'll sell it to you, And so that's what I would probably suggest. If you know there's a neighborhood that you like, I would be driving around looking for houses that look like they're in garbage condition. That's usually a pretty good indicator that that person either doesn't have the time, they don't have the money to fix it up, which means maybe they could use a partner. Watch an episode that'll be coming out shortly. We'll be talking about this. Who could use a partner, and so somebody who doesn't have a whole lot of resources to leverage, you could potentially partner with that person to fix that house up, and then you could either buy it yourself, refinance it on the back end. I mean, there's 100 things you can do.
Yeah.
Or you can find a situation, you see somebody with a moving truck or an estate sale. An estate sale usually happens when somebody passes away and they're selling all the crap that was in, this house to get it ready to sell.
Right.
I've gone to many estate sales and said, hey, guy who's running this estate sale, like, is this house, are you guys going to be selling this house?
Yeah.
What if I can buy it from you right now? In my case, I go to a lot of different houses over the course of time, and I simply ask people, would you be interested in selling me this house? And most of the time they say no, and that's okay, right? I get it. Yeah. But sometimes they say yes, you know? So you never know if you don't ask. So every house is for sale eventually at some point on the time scale, and it might be just that time. So to answer your question more specifically, what were my biggest mistakes? My biggest mistakes were not realizing that every house is for sale. I probably let God knows how many jobs just like slip through my fingers because I didn't open my mouth and ask, right? There's nothing worse than being a real estate investor and then finding out that somebody got a great deal like right next door to your own personal house. And you're like, what the hell? Like, damn it, I could have bought that house. And I've had that happen to me many times. It's like, all I had to do was talk to this neighbor and say, hey, just so you know, like I buy houses and I'd be interested in buying your house if you ever want to sell. Or if you decide to sell, let me talk to you first, and just being involved in that way. So, it's always mind-boggling to me how many people just don't bother asking. They wait for a for sale sign to come up. We talked about this in an episode recently too about getting a job. You don't have to wait until somebody's putting a listing out there to say like, hey, we're looking for help. Everybody's looking for help. Point. Just call them. If they say no, what's it matter? It took you 12 seconds.
Hang up, that's it.
Hey, do you have a job? No, okay, no problem. I'll call back another company, and that's what you do. You just get your nose to the grindstone and you go out and you find opportunities. So
in today's market, the interest rates are gouged right now. Okay, explain that. To someone that doesn't know much, I know that interest rates are the highest that they've ever been. And so for me,
the highest they've been in your adult life.
In my adult life,
right.
and they're the highest they've been in a long time.
Yeah.
And there's been such a polar drastic change from 0% to 8%.
Correct.
And so someone that doesn't know a lot of information like you will just think right off the bat, like myself, oh, it's not a good time to buy right now.
Right. Correct.
So I guess that my question is it not a good time to buy right now? And obviously your reaction.
Yeah, I understand your perspective because it's pervasive and everybody falls victim to it. We like it when things are cheaper, right? But prices go in one direction, generally speaking. They almost always go up. In real estate, that's with a very few exceptions, they go up, right? The rates that we have right now, I think the prime rate's sitting somewhere close to 8% right now. So if you get like a regular conventional mortgage where you are going to live in the house, you're going to be paying close to 8%, which sounds crazy when just 2 or 3 years ago it was like 3%.
Right.
Now that could be like on this loan that I was telling you about over here, $400,000 loan, I'm paying $3,500. If I had done this deal 3 years ago at $400,000, I might be paying like $2,800. $700 is a lot of difference, right?
Yeah, it is.
So if I'm cash flowing $1,000, I could have been cash flowing $1,700 if I had bought it.
Compounds,
right.
Right.
But let me give you a quick history lesson. First off, 8% is the average interest rate over since the Fed has existed. In the 80s, like when your mom was buying, her house or your grandparents in the 70s and 80s, interest rates were like 16%. That was normal. That was a normal price to pay for a loan back in those days. And they didn't have FHA, so they couldn't buy a house with their 3.5% down. They had to come up with a 20% down payment.
Wow.
Yeah, so like all of these people who always whine and complain about like, oh, well, the boomers ruined everything for us and like our generation are such horrible victims and we don't have opportunity. They just don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
You don't have to come up with 20%. You only need 3.5%. 8% is higher than it was a few years ago, and that kind of sucks. But things were on sale for 10 years. Now the sale is over. Right now we're just back in normal times. Right. When rates went down to 8% in the 90s and in the early 2000s, people were throwing parties because it was like, oh my God, they're giving this money away. And if you think about it, I mean, if you put your money into an investment and you're getting 8%, it's kind of like, yeah, that's fine, but that's like barely beating inflation, right? Like if you have an investment account. Right now, you got inflation in like 5-6%, you would only be making 2% on your money. You can get that in a savings account. It's a garbage investment, right? So the reason I'm saying that is that we kind of look at 8% and go like, that's not that great from when you're making money on the 8%, but when you're paying it, people are like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to pay 8%. It's like, no, that's just kind of what money costs to borrow, If you go to a hard money lender, which is a person who will give you money in exchange for interest, they've got 15% rates. That's the standard in most hard money scenarios across the country for real estate investors. It's a great tool.
And real quick, hard money versus soft money?
So hard money is a term that is specifically talking about a guy who has a big fat pile of cash who will loan it to somebody else to buy a piece of real estate. That's what we call hard money. So, I use hard money all the time. If I don't have the cash sitting in the bank to pay $400,000, but I do have $100,000 that I can use as a down payment, then I'll get a hard money loan and I'll borrow $300,000 to make up that difference and then pay that guy 15% interest on the $300,000. Now 15% hurts, nobody likes it, right? Nobody likes paying interest, but it's just a part of using other people's money, right? And if I'm calculating my math and I'm rolling that into part of what I'm expecting as a part of this investment opportunity, then it's no big deal. It's just a part of, it's like, a roof costs $15,000, that's what it costs.
Right.
Okay, holding this property for 6 months is going to cost me $20,000, that's what it costs. I put it in the budget and then I buy it appropriately.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry about the interest rates. If they go down, great, refinance it and get a lower payment, but they might go up. They might go back to 15% or 16%, which they did for 20 years in the 70s and 80s. That was super normal. So yeah, hell with that. Like my suggestion is get the hell in right now.
Fixed rate, right?
If it goes low, fixed rate for sure. Always go fixed rate if you can. If you're looking at something for a long term. Why a fixed rate? Because you can plan, right? You are hedged against what if rates go to 15%. Well, now you're going to be happy you've got 8%. You're going to be thinking, oh, thank God I got in when it was 8. Just like the people now are saying, thank God I got in when it was 3 or 4. Right. So fixed rate is the way to go, particularly on your own property. A lot of people who lost their shirt in the 2008 crash, which was a unique time that is, I don't want to say isn't going to happen again, but it's only happened one time ever in American history in the way that it did at that time. And we recovered in like 5 years. It wasn't that big of a deal, right? I mean, everybody makes it out to be this huge calamity. It became an opportunity for people like me who were like, hey, hell, the houses are on sale, you know? But fixed rate is a benefit to you because if the rates go higher, you have the exact same price for your house. So if your payment is $1,500, it's going to be $1,500 as long as you keep it that way. And if rates go back down to 3%, you can refinance it and maybe make it into $1,100 payment, and you can. So
there's no downside to getting fixed rate.
Like, I certainly don't think so. So the reason that
for planning purposes.
Correct. Yeah. So the reason that people would do a variable rate is because they sometimes will get a discounted rate for the first few years, right? So you may get like 6%, let's say, and then after a couple of years, then they're going to start tacking on interest, and that can become very expensive because your payment might be that $1,200, and then in a couple of years when the interest rate changes, it may go up to $2,000, and that's not in your budget. A lot of people can lose their houses that way. That's exactly what happened to a lot of people in 2008. That's why they lost their houses. To many people. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there, man. There's a wide world, but you know, all of this probably sounds very daunting. You're probably like, oh my God, every time you answer a question, 13 more come into your head. And I so sympathize with this because I started in real estate when I was 18. I bought my first house in 2007, which was a really bad time to buy a house because a year later it went from, I bought it for $100,000. A year later it went to like $30,000. That's what it was worth. I had a negative net worth at that time, negative 70 grand, you know, to get myself started. Oh, this sucks.
And you didn't stop.
But no, hell no, man, because it was like, and I didn't like it. I wasn't happy about it, but I was able to get a tenant into it after I lived into the house for a handful of years and paid the bill just like I would have been paying rent if I was in an apartment or something anyway. So I paid the rent.
How old were you?
18 when I bought the house.
You were 18 when you bought your first house.
We closed in November after I graduated high school. So I graduated in May, and it sucked because I've always been a worker, and I saved up a bunch of money while I was in high school, and I put all of the money into buying this house. And I was like, hell yeah. Just like you said, like, I feel cool. I'm 18 years old and I bought a house. And then the market just happened to tank immediately thereafter. And so my life savings was gone. I didn't have any cash. My credit was totally tied up. I was making like $12 an hour, you know, working at a now defunct electronics store, you know, it was, and going to school full time and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So it sucked, you know, it was bad. But I was able to get a tenant into it, and I continued paying that mortgage. And it took me 10 years before that property came up high enough for me to be able to sell it and get out without losing money. And so, like I said to you before,
I guess my question is, like, you know, were you were probably obviously still working, because once you own the house and you get it and you had enough of a financial cushion to be able to both support the mortgage and also have a little bit of your own cushion financially to just have flexibility in your own life in case any other things come up. And that's always the first step. You began buying, you know, one more home, two more homes.
Yeah.
Like what was that process like once you first made your first purchase and you kind of started getting a little bit more lift off, and how did all those, like the rules of compounding?
Yeah. So I did it wrong. Right? So I didn't know what I was doing.
Great.
All I knew I wanted to do was buy real estate, because you look around, you go like, okay, everybody who has money has real estate. And, you know, if you look at the statistics, like 75 or 80% of American millionaires because they own real estate, right? So most people in this country own their wealth in real estate. So it was like, okay, well, that seems pretty clear. That's something that we want to do. My dad had been like marginally involved with real estate up until this point, and he had always handed me the books, and I always read the books. So I knew a lot of these ideas going in. What I didn't know was how to leverage it, and I certainly didn't know what was coming in 2008, right? So I buy this house with the intent of living into it for a couple of years and then wanting to rent it out when I got out. Because I bought this little condo that was walking distance away from the college where I went, up at USF in Tampa. And so I paid $100,000, and I was like, great, now I'm gonna have a house that I can live in, I can go to school right up the block, and then when I'm done, I'm going to have this great rental unit, because all of these kids come to this college and they're gonna need to live someplace. And so I thought, okay, this will be a good opportunity. I'm going to live into it. I'm going to rent it. when I move out, and then I'll go do something else. And that's exactly what I did, despite the fact that the economy tanked and all this kind of thing. Basically, I bought that condo with my FHA loan, so I put the 3.5% down, got into the condo, lived into it, and then I saved up a few bucks, over the course of the next like 3 or 4 years. Got through school. Years. Oh yeah, man. And which in hindsight was foolish. I wish I had done it a different way. If I knew then what I know now, I would have been going out there and buying like every single thing I could get my hands on. I would have been buying those other $30,000 condos instead of crying about like, oh, now mine is sadly lower than it otherwise ought to be. The next thing I did was I bought another house for me to live in. Right. And I used the FHA loan again. You can use it 2 times in your life. And so I used it for the second time, and I bought another house. By this point, the market was a total garbage heap, and so I got a really good deal on this house. I bought it, did a little bit of fixing up to it, but basically I was still broke and I was still not making much money. I had gotten through college and I was a school teacher at the time, and I was like, damn, I just don't have any money and I really want to get involved in real estate. And my dad at this point started getting into the flow, right? And he was like buying everything he could get his hands on. He was buying duplexes for 40 grand or something. I'm thinking like, that's amazing. I know that's an incredible deal. I don't have 40 grand. You got 40 grand, that's great, because you got this business and you've got access to this money. I don't, right? I'm a school teacher and I'm like just barely making it by.
That's where I'm at right now,
Yeah, and so most people are in this situation, So what I did was knowledge that I learned from all these books that I've been reading, over the course of my life, and I basically put together what is known as a seller financing deal. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any skill. I wasn't in the blue collar trades. I didn't really know how to do anything. I was a little handy, but that was about it, I identified a deal, approached the seller of this deal, and I said, look, I can't buy your house. I don't have the money to buy your house. I know you want to sell it, and I know it can be a good deal. Let's partner on this thing. And essentially what we did is I got them to agree to give me the keys for 1 year. And then with those keys, I could go into that house, tear it apart, remodel it, put it all back together, and then sell it for as much money as I possibly could. If you start driving around with the intent of thinking like, I can buy any one of these houses and I should, you will be like, oh my God, there's opportunities all over the place. It will feel like there's you're drowning in like opportunity, really. Yeah. And then just start asking people, even if you don't know how to do it. All you gotta do is get on the horn. Jordan, oh my God, I found this deal. Like, what do I do? And I'll be like, don't worry, dude. Do this, and this, or like, which maybe like sell it to me, or go down to your real estate group, and then there's 100 ways to make money on real estate. Yeah, and it's so simple. Yeah. Like you need your 20 grand. You can make. I can guarantee you, man. If you like spent a week going out and like picking a method of buying a real estate, you can make $20,000 like this month if you wanted to, if you had to. I guarantee you could do it. All you would have to do is identify a deal and then sell it to an investor. Yeah, just like what I talked about in that episode. Right. I mean, people have entire businesses where that's all they do. You could do that. Just wholesale. Go to the estate sales. You could literally just drive around and go to estate sales and ask people, is this house for sale? And then like lock down a contract right then and there.
When you say estate sales, you mean like people selling everything inside the house?
Yes, yeah. Like you see like a lot of times people hire companies and they'll have like estate sale at this address. It's a garage sale. Yeah. But sometimes they'll just open the house and you just walk through and they're selling all of the furniture and all of this stuff.
I wonder if there's if there's a place where people locally post.
Yeah, they advertise them. Yeah, they advertise them on.
I'm gonna find places of
Craigslist. I mean, there's all kinds of places. There's websites where you can advertise garage sales. Right. Garage sales, moving sales, same thing. People are already moving. There's 1,000 ways, but like literally just driving around and asking for rent signs. If somebody is renting a house and they want $2,500 a month for this, and you're thinking, okay, I can live with that. You can ask them, to owner finance it for you, and then you just pay them the $2,500. I think they may be willing to sell it to you just for the $2,500 without you ever having to go to do your FHA loan and doing all this other stuff. There's a billion ways to buy real estate that people just don't know about.
Wait, can you repeat that again?
Yeah. So let's say that you find a house that's for rent, and the house is renting for $2,500 a month. And you call the guy and you say, hey, I am interested in buying your house. I would like you to sell it to me but I would like to be a seller finance. And basically, so what's called is a lease with an option to buy. And so what you do is you sign a contract saying, I am willing to pay you $300,000 for your house, and I will pay you that $300,000 in 5 years, or within 5 years, or 3 years, or whatever. But this is called the balloon. If he goes, okay, yeah, that sounds good, and then you say, okay, I'm going to pay you this rent. It's not going to cut down my payment or the amount at all, and I'm now locked into this agreement with you. Well, if that house goes from $300,000 on the day that you made that agreement when you started renting it from him, and then it goes to $500,000 within that 5 years, you can just sell it for $500,000 and put $200 in your pocket.
I mean, it sounds like a balloon payment can be potentially scary.
Well, so the goal at that point is that you are using that 3 or 5 years to get into a position where you can either refinance it, just go out and get a mortgage on it. Now, if the value has increased because you've done improvements to the house, you fixed it up and you remodeled it, right? Like your goal is still my goal personally would be to add value to that piece of property. And however I could. And by doing that, I'm building an equity, which means I'm now refinancing the property instead of financing it on the front end. And so I don't have to come to the table with any cash.
Right. So when you refinance it and you've added value into it by renovations or whatever it is, by refinancing it, you could possibly get that lump sum total from the bank.
Yeah.
And
then you pay back.
And then you pay back the original balloon price. Payment with
Correct.
the other guy.
Right.
Now you own it, and then you take out whatever chunk
you could bring back more if you wanted to. So there's a 1,000 different ways to do that. But yeah, I mean there are 100 ways. And why would somebody want to do this, right? Like why would the landlord agree to get into this sale price? What if you were to say to him, I see that your house, I like this house. I'm willing to pay you the $2,500. I will be the best tenant.
Cover his mortgage.
I'm going to be the best tenant you have ever had in your entire life because I want to have permission from you to do this, and this to your house. If it needs a new roof, I'm going to put the new roof onto it. Yeah. You're not going to do that. If your air conditioner breaks, I'm going to call the AC guy. You're not going to worry about that. I'm going to come in. I'm going to do the new floors. I'm going to give it a fresh coat of paint. And I'm going to do the kitchen. I'm going to do all of this stuff. And if I don't follow through with my part of the deal, too bad for me, you get a remodeled house for free. If I do follow through, you get this agreed upon price, which you're happy to take as it is right now. This house, you're going to continue to get this rent payment, right, every month until I decide to close out this balloon or until it expires, and then you get to repossess the house from me. And we're all good to go. And this is like a great deal for somebody if you have a lot of people want to get involved in renting real estate, and then they find out that renting real estate is a business. It's not just a machine that prints money, right? Like obviously we talk about the passive income and all of this kind of thing. This is very important and very critical, but it's still a business. You have to stay on top of it, and roofs still have to get replaced, and toilets still leak, and it's a pain in the ass, just like every other way of making money, It costs money, you have to invest into it, and you have to do a lot of things in order to manage the property. So a lot of people get into real estate thinking it's going to be this simple, like totally passive thing. And then they find out that like, oh no, you got to like chase around tenants because they never pay you on time. And then you get phone calls in the middle of the night. Oh, my toilet isn't flushing. What are you supposed to do? I mean, there's just problem after problem. It's just a part of being a business owner. If you are not looking at it, what I was going to say is that if you find somebody who is a landlord who doesn't like being a landlord, which is most landlords, right? Somebody who owns 1 or 2 houses, that guy will be super thrilled to not have to worry about dealing with all of your shit anymore. And also, if you don't make your payment on the first like you told him you're going to do, he's taking your house. You know what I mean? And all of the improvements that you did to it. So for him, it's like a zero risk proposition. For you, it's all upside because you can get into that house, buy it with no money down, do whatever improvements you want to do, potentially cash flow it. Maybe you live in 1 room, you got 2 or 3 other rooms, you're renting out. Now you can be generating cash. And the property is still going to be appreciating over the course of time. You are manually involving your labor into it.
And as long as you don't mess up any of the agreements in the original leasing or still a financing deal, as long as you follow through
with the contract,
then you have ownership rights of the property.
Correct. Right.
And at that point, it's your disposal to sell whenever you wanted to.
You can sell it. You can close your balloon whenever you want.
Close your payment.
Right.
And as long as you chose a good spot, then at any given point, if you know that the rent's going to be too much for you or something happens,
correct,
you can get a quick resale or turnaround from the bank and refinance it, and then they cover the balloon payment.
Correct. Yeah, so you can either keep it by refinancing it, or you can sell it and just pay them off with the proceeds from the sale, and then you get whatever's left over. I've done this. This is how I did my very first deal. That's how I got started when I was totally broke. I got into a seller financing deal because I was totally poor, and I had like I told you before, I had a negative net worth at the time. I literally had no money, but I was able to identify a deal where the people needed to sell the house, right? They were in a situation where they had this house and they didn't want it anymore. I wanted it, but I didn't have the money. I had a 1-year balloon because my intent was to flip it, right? So I was going to go in there and fix it, and I did. And how did I fix it when I didn't have any money? I had really good credit, and I had a lot of credit cards, and I spent the shit out of those things. I mean, I swiped those cards like crazy, but I got that deal put together, and I made, my first like operating chunk of money in this, using this method. And I knew that this existed because I read all of the books, and I watched all the freaking YouTube videos, and I go to the meetings, and like I was just aware that maybe this is an option.
So how much time did you spend per day fixing up that home? Like, did you have a full-time job as well?
I had a full-time job. I was going to school full-time, like going to college at the time. So, and I was doing after-school programs. Long story, but bottom line, I was probably working like 60-hour weeks, just like at my job.
Primary.
Correct. Right. And now I didn't have a baby at the time, so it was significantly easier on that time. But yeah, I mean, every night I was there for 2 or 3 hours, like going and cranking it out.
Quick, yeah.
And then every weekend I was there from like sun up to sundown, busting ass. Now, personally, I enjoy doing that. I like working hard. I'm one of those people that, like, when I'm sitting around, I start feeling lazy. I feel like a useless guy, so I like working hard. And I have the same feeling that everybody else does. You feel tired, you feel worn out. I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall and all of that kind of stuff. So, like, I don't want to give anybody a false illusion. But ultimately, I just like wanted this really bad. Like, I knew that I didn't have any leverage. The only thing that I had was freaking grit, and I found this opportunity. I was like, oh my God, I'm making this happen, And
So after the year, you were able to, did you end up refinancing it?
No. So we sold this property.
After how long?
So it took about 6 months, and I sold it in 6 months.
It took 6 months to do all the renovations? And then it took another 6 months?
No, it took about 4 months to do the renovations and then 6 months to close on the back end.
And then,
so from the day I entered the agreement, 6 months later, I had a check in my hand.
Wow, okay. Yeah. So then in other words, the selling process after all the renovations were done was like 2 months.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so by the time you get it listed and somebody finds it and they get their financing, that's usually a somewhat time consuming.
And so you waited to find someone to come and buy.
So what we did was we have worked very closely with a real estate agent. I wasn't a licensed realtor at the time. This is my first deal in the investment space. And so, we hired a real estate agent, and he came in there and did what real estate agents do. He took a bunch of pictures, put it online. Somebody came in and bought it.
And that was it.
I put,
and so then you profited, what
it was about 40 grand, 35, 40 grand.
40 grand,
which at the time was
significant.
Like what I made in a year, you know what I mean? It was like, and I made that in 6 months working on the nights and weekends. Now, why in my mind, I didn't say to myself, why is it that I just made as much as I make in a year working 60 hours a week when I could just be doing this instead?
Yeah, imagine if you weren't working full time.
Correct. What could I have done? Maybe that 6 month period would have been a 3 months. Or maybe I could have been doing 5 of those properties instead of having a scarcity mindset that I dealt with for a long time. Right. And I know you asked me questions like, how much time did it take to do this? Way longer than it could have, right? Because I was working under this assumption that I had to play so safe. I was just not willing to put myself out there and just grab the bull by the horns and just do it. I was so scared. But now looking back, I'm like, what were you thinking, man? Like, you were wasting time doing these other things that were, you're spending the Pareto principle, right? You spend 80% of the time for 20% of the results. Well, I was spending 20% of the time for 80% of the results. It was so simple, And so once you get yourself properly aligned, now all of a sudden you can be just like this value generating machine. And I still feel like that to this day. Like, I'm sure that like 1 year from now, 5 years from now, I'm going to look back at my version of myself now and be like, you fool, you know, what were you doing? Why weren't you out there just being more aggressive? And the answer is because Jonah today doesn't know what the future is, and I'm afraid, right? But my fear can be swayed by just having a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of trust in the way that the system works. You will not lose money in real estate if you do your math correctly, right? If the economy takes a shit, if you put yourself into the right position, you're still going to be okay. You know, like if you build in enough equity on the front end, meaning like, let's say that a house, everybody else is buying houses in a neighborhood for $100,000. If you buy a house for $50,000, if the market cuts in half, now you're still safe, right? The market has never cut in half. That has never happened. It might go down by 30, 40%, something like that. It can do that. That's certainly true. But then you just wait it out, right? So yeah, I don't know. I'm just it's when it comes to like actually writing checks and like accepting these big ass mortgages and all of this debt, it's scary. But you know, you just gotta like, you just have to be willing to go for it and just give it a try. So yeah, my process took way longer than it should have. I hope that I will look back at my current self and be like, why were you dragging your feet and spending your time doing these stupid things when you could have and should have been doing this? But I intend on figuring it out and finding out.
So how do you know when something's a good deal, like financially?
So here's the way that I look at any real estate deal, right? There's a bunch. I'm a fan of making money in real estate, right? So I don't really care like what the deal is. Now I may need a cash infusion in order to do something more long term, but my goal is to flip or to rent. It's one of those two things, right? I'm trying to make money in real estate one way or the other. I don't really care how it's going to be. So if I am looking for a rental property, what I want to know is, can I buy this piece of property and make more on a month by month basis on average than it costs me to own that property? If my mortgage is $1,000 and I can charge somebody $1,500, that's a good deal. I'll take that deal, right? And so that's what I'm looking for on the rental side of things. When I'm looking at a flip opportunity, which oftentimes I want a flip because I need a down payment to put onto a property that I want to buy, or I need to reimburse myself for some debt that I took out. You know, I took a short-term debt from this person, so I need to give them their 50 grand back. Like, okay, I need to go out there and make $50,000 so I can pay this person back or pay the IRS or do whatever I have to do. So what I do in that case is basically I will look for property that is, my niche is garbage properties. Like I don't do these lipstick projects. Lipsticks is this idea of like, yeah, you're gonna change the floors and then paint it and then hurrah, it's
cosmetics,
done.
Right?
No. I'm like a strip it down to the studs and like tear it apart and like totally redo it. That's just what I've fallen into, and that's kind of what I like doing. I'm good at identifying what's involved with that. And also there's a little less competition in those kind of properties because not a lot of guys are willing to do
all that work.
The extent of work that I am willing and capable of doing, which again is the whole point of the blue collar blueprint as it is that people who work with their hands are uniquely qualified to take on projects like that.
That can earn them significant amounts of returns in their time.
Yeah, I mean, like, so you could find a deal and do that as somebody who's not a blue collar person, but you'd have to hire somebody.
Right.
So this could be 50% additional, you know, so if it would cost me $100,000, it might cost you $150 because you got to pay me to do all the work, right? And so as a blue collar guy who's capable of doing that, especially if you're somebody in my position where you have control over your schedule, right, where you can work for a relatively small period of time and just float your life and then dedicate the other part of your time to building wealth, that can be extremely beneficial because I don't touch any money that I get from my investment side. When I'm getting cash flow from these rental properties, I'm dumping it right back into the next one, right? When I flip a piece of property, I'm paying off mortgage over here or I'm using it to buy another thing. I'm always leveraging that investment money into the next thing.
Right.
That's why I teach the system, the learn, earn, and churn that I do, because I earn and support my family and we like make it by comfortably, nicely, you know, on what I earn my 1 or 2 days a week that I'm working. I'm building for our future, you know, on those other days and just reinvesting every cent that I've got. And I think people need to understand this too. It's not like there are a lot of people who think, oh, if I could go flip a house and make 50 grand, right? I make the 50K in 30 days and I follow the exact system that we talked about a couple of episodes ago, people are like, oh shit, I made it. Like that's, no. Now you're ready to get started. Like now you have some money that you can now use to go buy another one and do it again. And yeah, you can throw a couple bucks in your pocket every now and again, but really what you want to do is get to this critical mass where you have generated enough asset base so that you can now reach financial freedom, which is where your investment machine, which is a lot of properties,
rentals,
a lot of rentals in my case, certainly in other strategies, but primarily rentals, will pay for my life. So now I don't have to do the 2 days a week doing the drywall thing, right? I'm transitioning out of that. And then once I'm there, now I can transition over to only doing real estate. I'm not there yet. I'm not financially free. And I own a lot of real estate and I have a cool sounding net worth, but it doesn't really mean squat until I've actually got money coming into my pocket.
Right?
So all I care about is cash flow. When I'm looking for a flip deal, to answer your question more concisely, I am looking for a property that is a dump, that is in a area where I know that houses sell for more. So the neighborhood and the house that we're sitting in right now, houses in this neighborhood will sell if they're really nice. And I'm talking about like everything is brand new, really, really well done, like I do. Those houses sell for $700,000 to $750,000, depending on how big the house is.
Right.
I bought this house for $330,000. That's a lot of room, right?
Totally.
So this is a great neighborhood. This is why I drive around at different places to see if I can find these deals, because when they come on, okay, here's an opportunity. It's on market for $400,000. I don't care what condition it's in. I can put anything back together for 150 grand in here. I put the 150 in. Now I've got 550. I can sell it on the back end for 700,000. That's money, baby. You know.
100%.
And one reason why I like to stick in neighborhoods, right? I like to farm neighborhoods because I know this neighborhood really well, really, really well. All of these houses are basically the same. I know for sure they will sell for this amount when I get it done, if I get it to this level. So that's what I'm looking for. So in your neck of the woods, all you have to do is jump on Zillow and like literally look at the little red tags. It'll tell you what everything is sold for.
That's what I want to ask you. So you can go on Zillow and you can find approximately what a certain area is selling for the max based on some of the best homes, right? So you kind of know the top range of what you're looking for.
Sure.
You can typically, based on like what the square footage of the house, for example, like approximately based on the square footage of the house, I can probably expect this amount of cost and renovations along with like all the big ticket items that I have to get done as well, like air conditioning or like whatever it is.
Yeah. So
you begin to kind of build like a semi quasi picture of okay, so like if I'm buying it for this, I'm expecting this, then I'm going to get this amount. And then also you can also use Zillow too, or whatever tool, to see which homes are on average what they're renting for in that area.
Correct.
So then from that point on, then you can just basically see, okay, now what's my mortgage going to be when I take this on? Am I reaching a certain percentage? And I think do you agree that it'd be good to have like, okay, for each buying decision I make, I want to have at least like this percentage of return on, like, for example, either my initial investment or monthly?
Yeah, so I'm a little ashamed to say this, but I don't look at it that way. I only look at it in pure dollars, right? People who are much more sophisticated than me do, in fact, look at it that way. They say, like, I need this X percentage of return. I almost certainly fall into whatever their sort of criteria are. Like I told you earlier, my goal is to earn $1,000 of net passive income for every investment that I make. I don't want to get hung up in the percentages per se, because to me it's like, if I can make $1,000, that's a pretty good cushion. Now, granted, if the payment was $20,000 for $1 million house or something like that, or a $3 million house, $1,000 isn't going to cut it, right? But if we're talking about like a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 investment, $1,000 is pretty damn good as far as my cash flow is concerned.
Got it.
So to me, I'm looking at dollars. I know how much money I need to make in order to support my family, in order to reach that financial freedom we were talking about. So my goal is just to get enough to cover that number. So if I can do $1,000, all I need is 10 that operate with $1,000. Now I'm good, right? Or 12 or 8 or 3 or whatever your nut is, I'm just looking to generate that cash cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. When it comes to flips, and I'm like looking at a lump sum of money that I'm trying to get back, I just literally just randomly pick a number that I feel like I kind of like I measure how much of an ass pain I expect this job to be, which is like how long is it going to take? Is it going to be like brutal work, or is it going to be like an easier one? Do I have to strip it all the way down to the studs and totally rewire it? Or is it going to be like, yeah, I just have to take this wall down and then we're going to be fine here? You know, so I'm measuring like how much ass pain it's going to be, and then I just assign a number to the ass pain. Right. But with all that said, a lot of people would be like, well, if I can make $10,000, I'll take a deal. No, you will not. Don't do that, right? Your minimum should be $30,000.
What do you mean?
The minimum profit you should be making on any flip you do should be $30,000 projected. Why? What if the market takes a slump and now you're not going to sell it for what you thought? Now you've got a $30,000 cushion. It's a lot better to not make money than to lose it, right? So you want to have a cushion built in there. It's a part of a risk of investing in real estate. I'm also a very conservative person when I'm doing my math, right? I'm saying like, I know I can sell X house for $400,000, but when I go to actually list it, maybe I'll try $440,000, right? And I might get it. If I do, that's just $4,000 of bonus money. But I want to make sure that my conservative estimate at $400,000, where I know for sure I'll be able to get this property, will pay the dividend that I'm looking for.
Right.
And so I try to approach things in a conservative way in that way. But yeah, as far as flips are concerned, I'm just looking for, like, I'm going to plan to make this much money, and that's what I'm aiming for. If I make more, obviously that's great. If I make less, that's not as great, but if I make something, then I'm still winning. So
right, and because you're in the same ballpark, because all the homes are approximately in the same range,
correct,
you're coming out to around the same percentage anyways.
Exactly right, yeah. So, you know, and things have changed pretty dramatically. Back in 2012, when I started doing this, I could buy a house for $50,000. I would put 30 or 50 into it and then sell it for $50,000. So I was making 100% return on my money. It's a lot harder to do now, you know. I might have 550, like this deal we were talking about before, and then make 150 on the back end. It's like, okay, well, that's a totally different percentage basis. That's why I don't really care about that. I just know that if I make 150, it's going to be worth my time. Right. Therefore, it's worthwhile doing it.
Yeah, got it. Like the size, the amount of that you're earning. It's no longer about the proportions, but it's more because the higher the percentage you get, the more difficult it is going to be to find a deal. But as long as you're making a significant amount that's worth your time, correct, and it's still in accordance with what you're trying to achieve.
Right. Now, how I do it is probably not particularly scalable, because this is all due to me, like, physically going out there and doing the work and you know, all of this sort of thing. So I'm limited in that capacity, and my next step in my career will be figuring out how to let go of that control a little bit and start to get it rolling in a more passive way, so that I can be utilizing my time in a more managerial perspective as opposed to being a literal hands-on. Everything you see behind me, my hands made it, you know, like I installed and put it all together with the exception of a handful of things. That works for me right now, but it's not scalable. I can't do 20 deals like that, especially not if I'm working, you know, doing my other thing. So there is a balance, and there's a niche, and there's a different way of approaching everything. Some guys may be watching this and thinking like, this guy's going about it all wrong. Well, maybe, yeah, for you, there are other ways that you can approach it, and there are different circumstances, but this works really well for me. And I'm just trying to figure out how to keep it rocking and rolling.
Yeah, I think that's the key too, is like everyone's always saying that there's one way, but people don't create flexibility for their lives. And by kind of pigeonholing themselves into one set expectation, it prevents them from, you know, having it, because one thing that works for someone else doesn't work for you.
Correct.
So like for me, I would probably want to have a little bit more resources available to maybe outsource a lot of the building work that I would have to do if I was choosing to do a flip, or if I was choosing to invest.
If you were doing a flip, I think what I would suggest to you is you go and you do all the hard part, which is identifying and finding a good deal, right? That's the hard part, because you got to do all the driving around, or you got to generate the lead, you got to do the math, you got to negotiate it, You do that part. Yeah. That's the time-consuming, pain-in-the-ass part that no investors like doing.
And that's the most important part too.
Right. If you have a deal, now maybe you're in a situation where you don't have a whole lot of money to work with. You have a good friend, Jonah. Hey, Jonah, I found this deal. Do you want to partner with me? Tell me about the deal. Chase, okay, here's the numbers. Hell yeah, I want to be a part of this deal. You know, now all of a sudden, I've got the money that I can use to invest it. You found the deal. We can figure out how this is going to work. Maybe you'll just be the boots on the ground. I can either just write you checks and say like, okay, you know, you're going to pay me back on the back end. There's 1,000 different ways that we can do it. In our case, it might be like, I need to physically go up there and be like, okay, this is how much this is going to cost. This is what we have to do here. From the design perspective, we're thinking about all of these things, and I can coach you and guide you through that. But if I'm making money, okay,
you're
sounds
happy to
great.
invest your time.
Yeah. Or maybe you can just find the deal and just sell it to me for a fee. You know, you make $10,000 for driving around to estate sales or something. You know what I mean? You identify a deal. I'll take that deal if it makes sense to me. What do I care what you paid for it?
So what's worked really well for you for finding relationships that ultimately end up being like possible lenders?
Yeah, so lending is one of the most important components to any real estate investor's life, okay? Making sure that you understand how many different options are available in the world, and having somebody who can put those deals together, right? Like having options casts a much larger net for the type of deals that you can get involved in. This is what I was alluding to earlier when I said, if I knew then what I know now. If I knew about some of the ways that you can structure financing deals, I could have owned like literally hundreds and hundreds of units at this point instead of 12 or 13, whatever I'm at now. But I didn't know, right? So I was limited because I was fearful of taking on debt, and I was limited because I was fearful about like, I don't make enough money and all this kind of stuff. Like, I don't need to make money. Real estate makes its own money, right? It generates income itself if you're buying cash flowing investments. So it doesn't have to rely on me. I don't have to look at a rental and say like, oh, that's a $3,500 payment. I don't have $3,500 extra dollars in my budget from going out and doing drywall. Now I'm scared, right? That's where my mind goes, but that's not the right math. This house will cost $3,500 a month. Will it generate $7,000 in season? Yep. Okay, good. That's a good deal. That is its own machine, right? It will operate itself. And so as long as I can identify those things, it comes together and you can start to move past this understanding, which is where most of us start. I work and then I pay bills. And so if something costs money, I have to trade my time in order to pay for that money. Well, that's not the way that real estate works. In the long term.
So what's the most efficient way of learning about all of your lending options?
So there are many different ways. I would encourage you to read books, okay, or to listen to podcasts like this, to listen to Bigger Pockets, to listen to all of the gurus and guys out there, because they've all got 1,000 different ways. I mean, you see this stuff. I know you deal with this with other, content providers. Here's a little known secret, or here's a hack about how to get into this deal. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways to buy real estate, and so watch the videos and listen to unique ideas that people have. Maybe some of them don't really work, or some of them are scammy, or some of them might work in a unique situation but not in others. I mean, there's a lot of different things out there like that, so you have to be mindful of it. But what I would suggest that you do is simply go to people who are currently investing in real estate and then ask them, how did you pay for all this stuff? Now, if he's a doctor and he goes, well, I make $1 million a year, so I spend $500,000 a year buying real estate. It's like, okay, well, that's not the guy I'm talking to. Go find me. Go find like the dude who's out grinding it out. Chase goes and finds a deal. Jonah, I found this opportunity. How do I finance this? Hey, Chase, let me get you in touch with this guy. He's got 38 different products that he can get you involved with. And so, just ask people, right? And start to develop a relationship with people who are doing what you're trying to do. That's why the interview component of the show exists. I want to be able to ask people so that they can tell me things that they know about, right?
And and you also know the right things to be asking that are also going to be pay dividends for the audience too.
Correct. Yeah, exactly right. And so, and you can also just cold call people. You can look at, you can. I don't know, it's tricky, but I would suggest going to a real estate investor club or a meetup or some sort of thing like that where the intent is to go and network with people. There will be lenders there who offer investment opportunities from a lending perspective at groups like that. And you can just go up and start striking up a conversation. Hey, this is my situation. I have this much money, or I don't have this much money. This is what I'm trying to do. What would you advise me? How can you help me? And they might say, well, you need to do these 3 things first. You need to make sure your credit's in tip-top shape. You need to have 20% down payment. Or they might say, well, you can identify a deal that has this proven cash flow, and then we can leverage this property. You know, I mean, there's a gazillion different ways. It would literally take me 100 hours to go through the tip of the iceberg that I know about. And I know there's an entire iceberg underneath the surface that I don't know about.
Right.
And I want to know about it, right? And I'll continue to push forward and learning. Because every time as I start thinking I have a handle on, oh, I've got 30 different ways I can finance this deal, there's 100 other ones that I don't know about. They may be better.
Wow. What have been the most useful and flexible financing options that you use?
Dude, yeah. So what we talked about earlier with the FHA option, buying your own house. That's the first one, right? Most people don't look at buying their own house as an investment. But if your intent is to buy the house and then move out of it into another house, but to keep that one, that's a great way to generate a rental property, because now you were able to get into it for a little money down and then you got out. So that's one thing. One tool that I use all the time are credit lines, or HELOCs, which are home equity lines of credit. Basically what that means is if I have a bunch of equity in a house, I can get a loan against that equity. And so if I have a $300,000 home equity line of credit, that money is just sitting out there in Chase Bank's account, and it's waiting for me to write a check. And I can just write a check up to $300,000. And I pay interest on that loan.
You pay interest on the loan, right?
But yeah, that's how I finance my deals. I use my home equity line of credit.
From all the previous units you already have, or some of the previous homes you
already have. So some of these properties, I have credit lines on the rental property itself. I have one on my personal house that I've, effectively flipped, right? Like I've increased the value of my house such that I was able to get a big fat home equity line of credit that I use and leverage out to buy other properties. And so that's one tool that I think is extremely useful, is utilizing credit lines, commercial lines of credit, and home equity lines of credit. Other options that are out there that a lot of people don't know about, there are plenty of loans that exist exclusively for real estate investors. So these are often called no-doc loans, which means that they don't care about how much money you make, right? So you could right now go and find a deal where, let's say that the property, we'll just use simple numbers. Let's say that you can buy the house for $100,000 and you can pay, the expected rent for that property is $1,000 a month. There are mortgages that will allow you to take up to 80% of the loan to value, meaning they'll loan you $80,000. And they don't care about what your credit or what your income is. You can have a zero income and they won't matter. All they're going to do is look at what the potential that property can produce, and they will give you a mortgage based on how much rent you can expect to collect off of that property. So they'll lend you, if you can expect to get $1,000 a month, they will lend you up to whatever a payment that would be sufficient to, say, $800 would be, if that makes sense.
So they will basically cover 80% of your mortgage.
So they will lend you money based on the income possibility of that property. So instead of doing what most normally, if you go to finance a car, for instance, right? The car company looks to see how much money do you make, what does your credit score look like, and how much money do you have to put down. These loans don't care about any of that shit.
So it's no longer about you. No. It's no longer about your financial position.
It's only about the income producing potential of that asset. Right. Now you have to have skin in the game on these kind of loans. You have to have 20% down payment or 30% down payment in order to make up that difference, because they're not going to just loan you the whole thing. However, if you were to flip a house, or if you were to buy a house in whatever method you wanted to use, you use a hard money loan, you do a partner deal with let's say we did that. You and I partner on a deal, and the agreement is that I'm going to make $50,000 by funding this deal that you found for us. We both go in there, we do whatever we do, we put this house together. Now the house is worth a lot more than what we paid for it and a lot more than what we improved it for. That's your equity. Now what we can do is refinance that loan. You have $150,000 in built equity now. You pay me back my $50,000. You pay off the original purchase price. You paid off the improvement cost. Now you've got $150,000 of extra equity that's sitting in there that belongs to Chase. Well, this bank, when you go to refinance it, will say, okay, well, maybe you can make $5,000 a month on this particular piece of property. Now what they will do is say, because you're refinancing it, you don't have to come to the table with any cash down. You've got $150,000 of equity, so we'll just cover the whole note. And they'll refinance the entire thing for you, and then you can just move on to the next one. So that's a way that, like, you specifically, without having access to a ton of resources, could pretty easily get into a piece of property without having any money coming out of your own personal life, or just generating an asset that will do it for you.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's like a very simple sort of Barney way of talking about it, but that's a lot of people do that. It's called the BRRRR method, right? I mean, this is BRRRR. It's buy, remodel, refinance, and rent. And the idea is that you do exactly what we talked about. You refinance all the money back so that you don't have to put any money into it.
I had heard about the BRRRR method, and I was familiar with like the whole you buy, you make it nicer, but I wasn't aware of how powerful the point is that the financing options or the financing constrictions are not necessarily on you as an individual, but it's more so you're getting access to financing in lump sums of money based on the asset. And so the asset is chosen properly.
Correct.
You can create a really solid first step for yourself.
Well, first in like a 1,000th step. I mean, the reality is that if you want to own 100 properties, let's say that's your goal. Like before you hit 50, you personally want to own 100 properties. That's a good goal to have. Okay, that's fine. Especially if they're all producing $1,000 in net income.
Right. That's
You'd
nice.
be making $100,000 a month. Would be not so bad. So if that's your goal, you are never going to have a job where you are earning enough money in order to go down to a regular bank and get a regular consumer loan where you can get enough mortgages to put a 20% down payment, and then your income is sufficient in order to cover that loan. That's not going to happen. So you have to utilize these commercial loans in order to leverage the amount of stuff that you have available. This was my mistake, is that I did not know this, or if I did know it, I didn't hear it because I was afraid of, oh, well, the interest rate is going to be more, and these rates are more, right? Because there's a higher degree of risk to the bank because they don't care about your tax returns and stuff. They only care about the property. So your rates are going to be a little bit more. But I was thinking, oh, I don't want to pay more rates, and oh, I don't want to take on all this extra debt. And so what I did instead was I would go out and then I'd flip 3 houses, and then I'd get a big fat pile of cash, and then I'd buy a rental. And then I'd go back out there and start over again, and then have to buy and flip, and then try and go back into doing this. And I wasted like 7, 8, 9, 10 years of my investment career doing that method. Now, it worked out okay because I had, things elevated in price and whatever else, but I could have been doing this method the entire time and just accepted that, I'm going to pay a little bit higher rate and I'm going to take on more debt. But I could have those 100,000 or those 100 properties in my control right now.
Right, because the rate's not that important, because what it's giving you instead is access to more capital to create a larger cushion.
The point is that you're buying the house so that it makes money. And if you're buying it so that it's cash flowing, you don't care what the rate is, right? It could have 100% interest rate. If you're still making money, what the hell do you care? What does it matter? Right?
After the rate because the rate's just baked into your monthly payment.
You just bake it into the cake. Yeah, it's like, this is what I expect. This is just how much it costs. A roof costs what it costs. I gotta put a roof on this sucker, right? So it doesn't matter whether shingles double in price or not. I gotta do it. Right. So I can cry about it, and I do all the time, But like, you just deal with it. You say, okay, this is my expectation, and if the rates are higher, now not as the deals that used to work 3 years ago won't work anymore. Okay, too bad. Go find the ones that will work today, and that's what we have to do. You just got to get out there and get comfortable with the idea and go grind it out. And I'm sure that a lot of this sounds like Chinese to a lot of people. They're like, I have no idea about any of the words that you're saying right now, right? So we're using some technical details. And the fact of the matter is, you're probably not going to know. You're going to know like 5% of what you need to know when you do your first deal. And then you're going to learn like 20% when you do it. And then the next one, you're going to learn 5% more, and the next one. And then eventually you'll get to a place where you just understand how all this stuff works. And when somebody comes to you with an interesting idea, you're going to go like, this is mind-boggling. I had no idea that this was an option, right? So don't be afraid of just going out there and giving it a go. Ask people's opinion, right? Talk to people, don't just fly out by the seat of your pants, and listen to what they say, but don't be afraid to just go out there and do it, especially if you're young. You know, you'll be all right. So what? You fall off your face. So what? It's tuition. You know. I spent $40,000 to get a bachelor's degree that's collecting dust in my closet.
Yep.
You know.
Same.
You know what I could have done? I could have gone out and flipped a house and lost $40,000 and learned what, you know, has made me into a self-made millionaire, you know, as opposed to like getting a really expensive reading list, which is basically what I got in school. Not to say that that's always the case, but in mine it was, you know. So yeah, if you lose money, count it as tuition, and then learn, and then don't do that again. You know, it's like and
tuition that has compounding results too.
Yeah, correct, right. Because the reality is, if you do it right, you're not going to lose money. You're gonna make money and then learn as you go. And it's okay to be a stumbling, bumbling fool. Get out there and do your thing. Don't worry about what other people are saying or thinking. Just go out there and learn how to do it. And if you want to be in this business, stop dicking around and go get in the business. You know.
I think that oftentimes it's I previously have been scared to start new things that I know are best for me, and I know that I'm smart enough to do, but it oftentimes does take a lot of like that rocket ship effort where you're using most of the fuel in the beginning to change your paradigm or change how you think about it.
Correct.
And I think that this is one of the conversations that people will listen to, and both the information as well as the plausibility and reality of it being possible will be the rocket ship thrusters that are needed to be like, holy shit, okay, it's okay that I didn't know everything that you just said.
Right.
I know that I'll be able to learn more about it, and I know that I'll be able to get enough, and I also know too that I don't need to actually know that much. I just need to know a little bit, and I need to have some source of guidance or direction. And if I can find those, I know I can find them. I might not have a joiner right next to me, but I will have real estate locals that are different groups and masterminds.
Correct.
And I can just start.
Yeah, and yes, I mean, it's like learning anything else, right? I mean, you just get in there and you start tinkering, you know, just go do it. Just go freaking do it. And people are always, totally. I mean, I'm one of these people.
Same thing with business.
What if I messed it up? What if I screwed up?
Yeah.
Well, then you freaking don't do that again. Like, don't, you know, like that sucks. And like, nobody likes to mess up. That hurts and that's painful. But you know what's really painful? Getting to retirement age and then being broke. That's freaking painful. You know what's painful? Living in the United States of America and not taking the opportunity to like live the American dream. You can do it. You can and you should. You have a responsibility and a duty to do these things for yourself, for your family, for your society, for your culture.
For your lifetime, yeah.
Just yeah. I mean, it's like you're here, man. Like, go do stuff. Mess it up. That's fine. Mess it up quickly. Get it out of the way, right? And then get on to do something else. It's okay. It's okay. You know.
Oh yeah.
And so that's my opinion, man. Just get off the freaking horse and just dive in that sucker and just get going.
Dude,
bruh,
this is awesome.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, hopefully, it's like I hope
this
it was some value to you. So
that was I think honestly, like I'm gonna like on my way home from like Vinoy, I'm just gonna like take a bunch of detours because there's a way to do it. There's a few places like I really would love. I know that I can find some good deals out there.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And I think that if I start like putting it out there, it's gonna fall into
that's
the lap.
it. You start looking around, going like, I wonder how to buy houses. You can do it.
You can do it.
Trust me, man. And the universe wants you to buy that house.
100%.
It's going to be like, hey, bitch, here you go. And then you're going to be like, you're going to start freaking peeing your pants a little bit and then just like get on with it and go make it happen, dude. Because it's, I don't know. There's so many of these methods where it's like, well, how am I going to find a piece of real estate where somebody's going to be willing to own or finance it? It's like, well, it's hard, man. You know how you're going to find it? By looking and by asking and then doing the thing. Yeah. Like that's how you do it. You know, I don't know what else to tell you. There are people who are doing it. I have done it many times. And I know that it works and it still shocks me when it works. You know what I mean? Like I run into these situations and I go like, I can't believe that just happened to me. Well, it happened because, because I had to. I had to give it a go. I had to give it a try. And got to do that. Got to do it. Got to give it a go. So,
dude, thank you. Thank you so much. Like, I'm definitely going to be looking for properties around the place that I want to live.
Hell yeah.
Like I love St. Pete. I love Tampa.
Good.
And it's a great market too.
And there's a lot of stuff there. There's a gazillion houses.
Totally.
And it's a growing area. It's a great spot, man. So, yeah.
It's funny. My roommate, last thing I'll leave you with is I told you that he just got a stupid deal. He's paying like basically 40% less than what the home was originally going for rent. And he said
they were
that,
asking for, right?
Yeah. What they're asking for like 35. He's renting it with his sister for like 22, which is like pretty significant. And they're in a super nice area, like gated. They're a 5-minute walk from the water, like very nice homes around them.
Right.
So like that's a great renting situation for them. But he was saying as fate would have it, he was saying there's a bunch of for rent signs everywhere around the house. And at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about how for rent signs are very quite possibly deals. Any home you see could possibly be a good deal or sale. And I think that that's a breadcrumb that I'm going to follow and look for some for rent signs and see if I can find any motivated sellers or see some of that works out.
Let me just go ahead and tell you right off the bat. The answer you're going to get is no, and then 99 and more no's. But on 100, you're going to get a yes, and you're going to be like, oh my God. You're going to, because when you're in the midst, right, you're cold calling people or you're doing all this driving around, it feels like it never ends. But it will. All you have to do is identify one deal. Yeah. If you can make $100,000 or $50,000 by spending a total of like 4 hours of your life, would you do that?
Yeah.
You know, like, yes, you would,
yes,
you know,
would,
and you'd be a moron not to, you know. So just be prepared. Be prepared to ask for 100. Like, make a tally and just be like, oh, it only took 27. I'm winning, you know what I mean? So, like, don't worry about that. But you got to get out there and just give it a go, dude, you know, for real.
I'm going to put a notepad on my air conditioning, dude.
Yeah,
I'm going to have a pen. I'm going to have it, like, tied next to, it's going to be attached to the paper. And every time I go, I'm just going to get back in my car. I'm going to put my seatbelt back on, turn my start button on. Look at the pen and be like,
that's it. Hey, man.
When we're done.
I'll tell you what. And,
let's do it, dude.
And then we'll revisit when you buy your first one. We'll talk about it. And
100%. We will.
Make some cool content up there. So
100%.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks,
dude,
buddy.
Good stuff.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Simple Fix.
Absolute pleasure.